Illinois State Co-Coordinator, and starting us off tonight is Scott Cross, here from Indivisible Illinois State Co-Coordinator. Take it away, Scott.
Thank you, Leni. Hey, everyone, just a few housekeeping things before we get started. I want to make sure that you stay muted, that you use the chat to ask questions throughout the call. Your meeting will be recorded, and follow us at Indivisible Illinois on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Contact us via email at general@indivisible.il.com. Again, welcome to the Indivisible Illinois call with ILVOTE. Right now, we're prepping for the 2022 midterms. ILVOTE believes that an engaged and informed electorate leads to a successful democracy. ILVOTE is certified as a bona fide state civic organization in Illinois. We promote civic engagement through deputy voter register trainings, voter awareness forums, and voter registration events. We'll hear from Evelyn Malone from Indivisible Northwest Illinois Crystal Lake with ILVOTE update here in a little bit. After that, we'll start with our Illinois Supreme Court presentation with Julia Sampson and Ed Mullen. And after our presentation, we'll hear some important announcements from Rose of Indivisible Illinois, co-state coordinator. About our presenters real quick tonight. Ed is a lawyer whose practice includes election law as well as employment law. He's works at a nonprofit formation, governance, and civil litigation. Ed has also advised hundreds of candidates on ballot access here in Illinois and litigated more than 100 candidate ballot challenges. Ed has obtained 5 favorable opinions in the election law cases from the Illinois Courts of Appeal and 1 from the Illinois Supreme Court over the past 2 election cycles. Also, we have Julie Sampson, who is the acting co-director of Citizen Action Illinois, the state's largest public interest organization. Citizen Action Illinois works hard to hold our elected officials accountable, just like we do here at Indivisible, on those issues every day, and in the State House and in Congress. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and toss it to Evelyn Malone with ILVOTE for the updates. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Hello, thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone. It's good to be here. To all of you who are here tonight, I believe that you are here and you are ready to board this 2022 electoral train. So get your tickets and claim your seat. We've got a lot of places to go. We've got a lot of people we need to talk with. And I'll have to say, once you board that train, there is no turning back. Once you board it, I strongly encourage you to focus on the words spoken by Duke Ellington years ago. He said, life has 2 rules. Number 1, never quit. Number 2, remember rule number 1. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, Leni, and everyone for this invitation to share my perspectives about voting. My name is Evelyn, and I am chairperson for Indivisible Northwest Illinois and Crystal Lake. And I'm also founder of the group Anti-Racist Jubilee Symposia, Celebrate, Educate, and Cultivate. And I am so blessed and excited to be with and among you guys tonight. I want to encourage you to keep one thing in mind, though, while I'm speaking. I am a retired teacher, and I taught kindergarten for a lot of years. So much of what I'm going to say tonight might sound like my kindergarten students. My students were professionals when sharing a story, but they knew how to ask questions also. They knew how to use the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and really the why. And sometimes, how do we do that? So that's how I learned along with them, because I want to help them achieve their desired goals every day, every week, and every year. And they knew how to weave their stories together to share as much information as possible in a short period of time. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. So let me tell you what I learned from them. To weave things together. In terms of encouraging you tonight, I want to share a message with you. So I want you to listen up. One of the best places to begin is to ask questions. That's what my students did. They always asked me, teacher, why? And I love their curiosity and their eagerness to know more. So here's my question to you. Why are you here tonight? Why are you getting on that 2022 electoral train? We must know why we're here. Why do we do what we do week after week after week in this space or other areas of advocacy? Well, let me tell you why I'm here tonight. Because I have crossed so many bridges, but not alone. You see, I'm from the civil rights era, and I say that very proudly. That era really taught me to be prepared for what's happening today. I didn't understand that then, but I certainly understand it now. That era taught me what it means to be proactive in the face of a crisis. My parents and the leaders in our community used words that were very similar to Reverend Warnock's father's message. They taught us to get up, get dressed, put your shoes on, be ready, and be on time. And with that thought, I'm reminded of Harriet Tubman, because she was also a bridge for me. And I would encourage you to read her story. She always had a plan in place and was always ready to go. She took many along with her on the way because she told them what to do, to be ready, where to go, where to meet. And we must have that same strategy in place as we continue in ILVOTE voter registration. We must make sure people understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we're going to meet, what time, and everything. My mother and the ladies from the church were bridges for me. You got to think about who's your bridge, because you're not here by yourself. You didn't get to this space all alone. The home, the church, the school, they were a collaborative team, and they knew how to turn up and turn out the vote because they had a strategy, they had a plan. Families in the community were bridges. There were people that we called auntie and uncle, but we did not share a bloodline, but they joined the cause and they persisted. And that just reminds me of Martin Luther King Jr. He said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? We must really consider that, not to say that you're not, but just to be encouraged by those words. So in your hearts and your minds, you answer that question tonight. I'm here in this moment on this Zoom call tonight because I am part of We the People. That's clearly stated in the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. And so are my African-American brothers and sisters, because you see, we are American. I'm here because I care about our collective democracy. I'm here because my greatest hero, my mother, would often say, if you see something that needs to be done, you do it. If you see people who need to be helped, help them. And I'm here because of the faith that I learned a long time ago, and it's still a bridge for me today. It gives me the courage to fight on in spite of the odds that I'm confronted with today. There is no time now, and there was no time then for us to hit the pause button. And together, we must actively phone bank, canvass, write letters, send postcards, vote triple. And this must be done in the state, across state lines, and we must repeat this until it's finished. Last January, just to give you an example here, when I was phone banking into Georgia for the runoff election for Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, I spoke with a young lady who owns a bakery outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I shared with her that the new Georgia project needed more phone bankers because, and texters and canvassers. And on the spot, I was able to text her the link for the new Georgia project. And rather than her just saying, okay, thanks for the link, I'll check it out later, this is what she said. I'm going to download that link right now. And when we get done with this call, I'm going to make copies, put them on my counter, and make sure that every one of my customers get a copy. And I'm going to encourage them to get involved. In my excitement, I said, really? Are you kidding me? You know what she said? Like my kindergarten kids? Why not? Why shouldn't I? We're all in this together. And Georgia is ruling right now. I want to be a part of that. So for me, that was motivational. And I just want to encourage us to keep each other motivated. And now, as I prepare to conclude, I want to encourage us. May we grow, not what was, but instead toward what we can be as a nation. Too many people have struggled and died and made it possible for every American to exercise their right to vote. You know who said that, right? Congressman John Lewis. Let's continue using our voices for the people. And just as my final statement here, remember, life has two rules. Never quit. This journey is not easy. It's difficult. And sometimes we battle, should I do this? I'm tired today. Well, get over it. That's what my little grandson would say, just get over it and do it. You know, it's temporary.
One booth, and if you want $500, and you basically just, showcase your.
We've got to be able to persist. And so I just want to encourage you to keep your voices active, keep your fingers active. We've got work to do, and collectively, we will get this done. Thank you for this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. I am fired up. If you're fired up, please put it into the chat. If you loved listening to Evelyn, we are going to have her back in March. So please, please, please follow us, and we'll keep you updated. And I'll also share links on how to keep in touch with us and Evelyn Malone. Thank you, Evelyn. And now we're going to move into our presentation with Ed Mullen and Julie Sampson.
Good evening. Can you see that?
Looks good.
Are you here, Julie? I don't see you on my screen. There you are. Okay.
I'm here.
Great. So my name is Ed Mullen. I am an attorney. I practice election law. I practice before the Illinois appellate courts. I practice before the Illinois Supreme Court occasionally. And recently, the General Assembly redistricted the Illinois Supreme Court seats. And to most people, that doesn't mean anything. Julie and I have been on the phone since we learned that that was going to happen, and understood the implications of that to all of the issues that are important to us in our daily lives, and have been struggling to figure out how to let other people know why this is so important and why they should be concerned about the Illinois Supreme Court races and excited about the Illinois Supreme Court races that are going to be on your ballot in June and November. And so this presentation sort of arose from our concern and our excitement about this election, because it is so important, and we think it's critical for people in the state to understand why our Illinois Supreme Court matters, and why, as activists, we should be involved with the Illinois Supreme Court. And I think, in particular, today we had Justice Breyer on the U.S. Supreme Court announce that he was retiring, which is going to bring a lot of attention to what role the Supreme Court has in our life. But I think we pay a lot of attention to what the federal Supreme Court does, and we pay a lot less attention to what the Illinois Supreme Court does, though it has a huge impact on our lives. So there's a little bit of education that goes into the background before we can kind of get into the more interesting stuff. Just understanding what are our state courts versus federal courts? What does our state court system look like? And I'm going to go through this really quickly, because I think education onto these issues is empowering, because if you're going to go out and talk to people about these issues, you want to understand what the court system looks like, what the court system does, and how the elections work. So very quickly, we have a federal court system and we have a state court system. The federal court system is what most people hear about in the news and think about more often when you talk about big issues like gun rights and like abortion and voting rights and things like that. But federal courts have limited jurisdiction. There are only limited numbers of things based on the US Constitution, based on federal statutes, based on what we call diversity jurisdiction, people from different states suing each other. So the federal courts are actually limited, and pretty much everything else goes to the state courts. And the state courts have general jurisdiction. They decide issues under the Illinois Constitution, state statutes, common law. But the big difference is, we know that Justice Breyer resigned, and President Biden is going to appoint someone with the advice and consent of the Senate, and that's how the Supreme Court justice on the federal level is going to be appointed. But here in Illinois, we have elections. We have partisan elections, not even nonpartisan elections for judges. We have partisan elections, so judges and candidates for judicial office are running for office as Democrats or Republicans or possibly independents, and we elect our Supreme Court justices, our circuit courts on the trial level, and our appellate court justices throughout the state. So that's a big difference between how the federal court system works and the state court system works. So a lot of people are less familiar with what the state court system does. And one of the things that I try to do is let people know all the different types of things that affect you as an individual or might affect you that the state court has a role in. So it affects people in their everyday lives. So issues like landlord-tenant, family law, so child custody, divorce, debt collection, criminal law, personal injury. These are all issues that are primarily heard in state courts. And so the rules that are made by the Illinois Supreme Court and the decisions that the Illinois Supreme Court have are the types of opinions that are going to have an impact on your daily life. You may not expect it on a day-to-day basis, but these are the types of things that people who wind up going into court, they have issues, and these are issues that are going to be decided in large part by rulings laid down by the Illinois Supreme Court. But in addition to that, we do have civil rights issues to go before the Illinois court. So we could have issues coming up over abortion rights if Roe v. Wade is overturned or further narrowed by the US Supreme Court. And the comprehensive reproductive rights law that was passed here in Illinois a few years ago is challenged. We have voting rights issues, we have gun control issues, all of the hot button social issues that you think about in federal court are also issues that have strong potential to come before the Illinois Supreme Court. And then something timely, we have pandemic related issues. So issues about vaccination mandates, issues about rules around mask mandates. All of those things are things that the Illinois Supreme Court and our state courts decide. So I'm just rambling on, Julie, if you want to jump in.
No, I think that the other element of this is the sheer volume of cases Illinois Supreme Court hears. You had a figure maybe in a later slide, but the Illinois Supreme Court will hear thousands of cases and decide and depose thousands of cases in a term, whereas the federal Supreme Court hears far fewer.
Right. So all of our judges in the state are elected. So we have circuit courts, which are known as the trial courts, and there are 24 of those around the state. So Cook County is one circuit, DuPage County is one circuit, but then when you get to less populated areas, there are multiple counties that can make up the
county. So that could be an option too. Yes.
Sorry. So above the trial courts are courts of appeal, and there are 5 courts of appeal districts, and those are judges that are also elected. And if you have an issue in the trial court, you have the right to go up to the appellate court and appeal. The Supreme Court sits above the circuit courts and the courts of appeal, and you get up there by the choice of the Supreme Court in the most cases. I mean, there are some cases that you can take directly to the Supreme Court, or you can ask the Supreme Court to review directly, but most of the cases get up there through what we call a petition for leave to appeal, where the Supreme Court decides that they're going to take an issue that is of broad application to the people around the state. So the issues that the Supreme Court are hearing are important issues that have percolated up from the lower courts, and they're issues that are going to affect people all around the state and their legal rights. So the Supreme Court is made up of 7 justices, and those justices are elected by district. And the district is supposed to be roughly proportionate to the population of the state, so that each of the districts is about equal. Because of the way Illinois is geographically set up, Cook County has a much larger population than any of the other counties. So we actually elect 3 justices from Cook County. So Cook County elects 3 justices from the entire county. And those are historically and most likely for the foreseeable future going to be 3 Democrats elected as justice from Cook County. The 4 justices that remain on the court are elected from other districts around the state. And these districts were last redistricted in 1964. So it's been before I was born, was the last time that the General Assembly has changed these lines. And if you see the photos here, the one on the left is the old district map, and the one on the right is the new district map. And you see all the way at the top, the second district stretched all the way from Lake over to Galena and Joe Davies County on the west. And that was just an enormous population district. And then some of the other districts were significantly smaller. So when you talk about the idea of one person, one vote, the vote was not equal around the state because there were some people who were one of 3 million and some people who were one of 1 million vote. And so it was not an equal vote. Now it is much more equal and much more proportionate. So right now in the June and November elections, we have 2 open seats and 2 seats up for retention. Retention is if a judge has previously been elected and their term is up, they don't run for re-election, they run for retention, and they need to get 60% of the vote, yes or no, up or down, with no party label in order to be retained. As we'll talk about in a little bit, retention is pretty much standard, and people generally get retained. We have 2 open seats. One is because of a retirement, and one is because of a failed retention. And right now we have a 4-3 Democratic majority on the Supreme Court. So if you look at the Illinois General Assembly, we've got a supermajority in the House of Democrats, but on the Supreme Court we only have a very narrow 4-3 majority. So judicial elections are partisan, as I said. People run as Democrats or Republicans. They're elected for 10 years to the Supreme Court. So that means if you are elected today, we can't fix that if a Republican is elected in 2 years, like with a congressperson, or 4 years with a governor. It's a 10-year mistake. It's all the way down at the bottom of the ballot. So a lot of people skip it. A lot of people don't know what they're doing. And as I said, retention is 60%. And we're going to talk on I think it's the next slide, about the history of retention, but it's very rare that someone is not retained. And what that means is these are often lifetime elections. So once you get elected, it's really hard not to get elected again. And so if you make a mistake during the first election when someone gets elected, then it's really hard to fix that mistake, and it's a long-term mistake. And we have 2 openings this cycle, which is highly unusual. We have 2 opportunities to win seats, but we also have 2 opportunities to lose seats. So Justice Kilbride was the Supreme Court justice in the 3rd district, which is has been redistricted out, so it's not the same district it was. But he is the first Supreme Court justice in Illinois history to lose retention. He lost with 56.4% of the vote. The Chamber of Commerce in Illinois spent at least $6.2 million to make sure that Justice Kilbride was not retained. And that race was the most expensive judicial race in Illinois history, and the first time where someone was not retained. And the whole purpose of making sure that Justice Kilbride was not retained was to create an opening on the Supreme Court for this cycle, and to spend presumably the same amount of money and the same amount of effort to make sure that that empty seat is filled with a Republican. Let's talk a little bit about that race, Julie.
So I think the main characteristic of this race was what the opposition decided to say about Justice Kilbride. And I had 7 mail pieces that all looked roughly like this, which was that Justice Kilbride was labeled as Speaker Madigan's favorite judge. Justice Kilbride had, taken money from the party, but this was the label that was slapped on to Justice Kilbride in paid media. And we assume that in this next cycle, that this will be what the opposition has to say about other candidates running on the Democratic side. And I just wanted to add, by the way, that Ken Griffin, who people probably have heard of, he's got a slate of candidates running for statewide office on this cycle. He spent $4.5 million in the Kilbride race. And Richard Uline of the Uline Packaging Company, he spent over $1 million. So this race will attract, big money. It doesn't take much for Ken Griffin to drop $5 million.
All right, so this is a slide I pulled of what the redistricting looks like in the new seats. So the 2 seats that have openings that I'm going to spend time talking about are the 2nd district and the 3rd district. So the 2nd district is made up of Lake, Kane, Kendall, DeKalb, and McHenry counties. And the 3rd district is made up of DuPage, Will, Kankakee, Iroquois, Grundy, LaSalle, and Bureau counties. And if you see the census demographics, they're much closer in population than they were before redistricting. But what this Daily Kos author did was put together a lot of numbers that I was in the process of putting together, and I saw that he'd already done it for me, so I just copied his slide and didn't do all the math myself, but I did check a lot of it. So the 2nd district, if you look at the history of the 2nd district, they elected Biden over Trump by 55.9 to 42.1. So you look at that number and you think, okay, this is a Democratic district. You look at the 3rd district and they elected Biden over Trump 53.1 to 44.9. Again, it looks like a Democratic district, but the fact is that that's a presidential year, and we have a different electorate during a presidential year. If you go back to the 2018 gubernatorial election, Pritzker got 48% in the 2nd district, and Rauner got 46%, which is only a 2-point difference between the 2 candidates. And the 2018 electorate is probably more indicative of what the 2022 electorate looks like than the 2020 when we had Donald Trump on the ballot. In addition, there was also McCann on the ballot, who was a libertarian and probably drew more votes from the Republican side of the ledger, which makes it even more of a close race. So what we have in the 2nd district and the 3rd district are seats that are narrow Democratic seats. So as I said, there's seats that we could win, but there are also seats that we could very well lose. And that's why, these elections are so important, because you're going to have 3 judges on the Democratic side of the ledger from Cook County. You're going to have 2 Republican judges from the downstate districts. And the 2nd and the 3rd are going to be the swing districts. And Evelyn was talking earlier about working in Georgia for Warnock and Ossoff. And, the importance of these districts is very similar to that. We were so excited about those 2 races because the balance of the Senate was in play. So even though they weren't going to be our senators, it was the balance of power in the US Senate that was so important. And here, what we have with the 2nd and 3rd districts is the balance of power for the Illinois Supreme Court. And it's the same concept, whether you live in Cook County or whether you live in one of the downstate districts. These 2 districts have to be important to you, because even if your justices vote for democratic values and are strong democratic justices, if you don't have a majority on the court, those votes don't mean anything. Why should you care?
Yeah, that's the most, it's kind of like what Evelyn was saying at the top. Why am I here? Why should I care about this? And a lot of people do care because we have 87 people on. So I think we, I feel like people do care. So just to recap, many of our most significant legislative victories, we feel like they're at stake and they could be in real jeopardy. I mentioned the Reproductive Health Act. You mentioned the public health and COVID safety laws. We've done a lot. This group in particular, that Illinois Votes, ILVOTE, Indivisible has done a lot to expand mail ballot voting and same-day voter registration. We think all of these things are at stake if the balance of power were to change on the Illinois Supreme Court. As we discussed, judicial campaigns are very different from other partisan campaigns in both the way that the judges communicate about their views, but also how they raise money. And I bring up how they raise money because, I think it creates an availability with judges. I mean, it doesn't have to be the nefarious big money type availability, but it also means that they're not working rooms, small donor events. So you can kind of think about it that way as well. But I put an asterisk by the way judges communicate their views because I think Ed can talk a little bit about the canon, and we can come to that on a separate slide. While these races are high stakes, I think most voters aren't aware that they're on the ballot. Ed mentioned that they're low on the ballot, so you'll see the governor's race, the congressional races, those will be up higher, so ballot placement's an issue. And I expect the governor's race and the congressionals will be high profile races. This year it'll be a new map. So for a lot of reasons, our work is really cut out for us.
Right, and you see how much money Governor Pritzker has put into his campaign and how much money has gone into the Irvin campaign in just a week or so. And all that money is going to drown out the messages that the Supreme Court justices are going to be trying to get out because they don't have the same amount of money. So people are going to be swamped hearing about the governor's race and some of the congressional races, depending on what district they're in. But it's going to be hard to break through all that clutter. So Julie mentioned the judicial canon, and there's two canons. One is that judges cannot ask for or accept money from people. And so that means that raising money is harder for candidates that don't have the connections to the Ken Griffins of the world and to the Chamber of Commerce. But in addition, judges are not supposed to make statements about issues that might come before them as a judge. There's an interesting Supreme Court case called the Republican Party of Minnesota versus White. And I hate saying this because Justice Scalia wrote this opinion and Justice Ginsburg wrote the dissent in this case. But this is one of the few instances where I actually agree with Justice Scalia over Justice Ginsburg, is that the candidates have First Amendment rights, even if they're running for judge, and should be able to talk about issues, not cases that are going to come before them or parties that are going to come before them, but they should be able to talk about the issues of the day. Because if you're a voter and you're trying to decide who to vote for, and you hear judges talk about, I've got this experience, I went to this school, I got these grades, I sit on this committee. That's not really what interests people. They want to know where you stand on the issues that are important to them and whether you share their values. And a lot of judges, I think, comply with this rule and don't talk about things that need to that might come before them. But I think some judicial candidates take it a little farther and are very conservative in a way that they keep silent about the issues that they can talk about, but they just don't want to talk about because they don't think that they're going to be more successful on the ballot if they talk about some of the issues that are important to them. But this does put a big limit on what judges can say and what judges can talk about in the campaign. And I think that means that some voters don't connect with the judicial candidates because they're not necessarily talking about the things that are interesting to them and the things that are motivating them to come out and vote. You've got to kind of figure out from your research and your reading between the lines whether the judicial candidates share your values.
So I just thought I'd highlight, and I think for this group in particular, I know a lot of people volunteered and did phone banking in Wisconsin in the 2020 primary. That race in particular was really rough. There was a Supreme Court seat that was decisive in shifting the balance of power on the Supreme Court. And this was part of a long game strategy in Wisconsin that included a lot of changes to voter ID laws that were initiated by Scott Walker, and then redistricting that happened, and that it culminated in this race. And I think the candidates combined it was a historic amount of money that was spent in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, $9 million matched then by outside groups, and it resulted in Republicans controlling the high court. And this was the headline. It was deemed the most undemocratic election in history. If you remember, Governor Evers was requesting that it was the height of the pandemic, and Governor Evers was asking the Republican-controlled Senate and the legislature to expand mail ballots and absentee voting, and they were saying no. But basically, forcing this election to happen resulted in the cementing of the Republican control of the Supreme Court, and now those legislative maps and future voter ID laws are what Wisconsin is facing. And I think this is a preview of what we fear of happening in Illinois. So let's talk about 2022 and turnout. I think that what we can guess about 2022 turnout, Ed talked about it. He talked about in the past how Biden did in the counties that comprise the 3rd Illinois district. But some people are saying that the turnout will be more like the Attorney General's race in 2018. And those margins were actually much closer, narrower. If you look at Kwame Raoul's performance in the 3rd, what's now the 3rd Supreme Court district, he very narrowly won that. And actually, the Attorney General got more raw votes than J.B. Pritzker and Bruce Rauner did in that cycle. So we don't know, we're spitballing. But from everything we're hearing, we feel like this could be a difficult year in terms of turnout. And we can just skip this.
All right. So we've talked about a lot of things that the Supreme Court does in terms of their opinions. And I think, you understand why the opinions that they write and the decisions they make are so important. But Supreme Court justices do more than that. When there is a vacancy, the Supreme Court justices appoint candidates to fill those vacancies until the next election. And one of the things that has happened in Illinois is that a lot of people who are not traditional candidates, they're minorities, they come from backgrounds that would not necessarily get them on the ballot. A lot of judges are state's attorneys or come from state's attorney's office or come out of working on the defense side for the government. The Supreme Court justices wind up appointing people, and in a lot of cases, depending on the Supreme Court justices that we've elected, they're an opportunity for minority candidates to be elected. They get appointed and get support and get elected. So I think diversity of the bench is one of the other things that we need to think about when we think about the importance of the Supreme Court. And then in addition to that, the Supreme Court basically makes the rules that we abide by in the courts. We've got our Code of Civil Procedure that the legislature creates, but the Illinois Supreme Court rules govern how we interact with the court system. And so if you're a litigant that doesn't have a lawyer, you're a landlord-tenant person, you're someone who's having a debt collected against you, the Illinois Supreme Court rules are very important in making sure that you have access to the court system and to justices. So I don't want you to just think of the justices in terms of the decisions they make, but they basically manage the court system. And it's important to make sure that we have strong justices and strong progressive justices, I believe, to make sure that the rules are fair and that we have a diverse appointed bench. So a lot of people in the chat have asked about the candidates, and we are going to talk about the candidates. The 3rd district race, which is DuPage, Will, and the Western counties, seems to have a pretty set race between a Democrat and a Republican. Those certainly other Democrats and Republicans may get in. You have Mary Kay O'Brien on the Democratic side. You have Michael Burke, who's a sitting Supreme Court justice on the Republican side, but he was appointed to a vacancy in the 2nd district. So he's sitting in the 2nd district seat, but he got redistricted into the 3rd district. So he's running in the 3rd district for that open seat that was created by the failure of the retention of Justice Kilbride. And so there were a couple questions actually in the chat about how do you determine who to support as a judge or what the judge believes if they're not going to talk about issues. And so what I did was I went to each of the websites of these candidates and just pulled out some, you can call them dog whistles, you can call them whatever you want. But Mary Kay O'Brien's a former legislator. She's promoting very highly the endorsement of Senator Durbin and other Democratic elected officials, and she puts union endorsements up at the top of her list of endorsements. So that tells you a little bit about what she stands for, even though she's not coming out and saying that. And she's a current justice on the 3rd District Court of Appeal, and there is her website. And then the justices talk a lot about their background and their experience. And what's interesting, or should be interesting to people reading those, is what do they highlight and what don't they highlight? So Justice O'Brien highlights her consumer advocacy. She highlights her work in death penalty reform. She highlights her work protecting children. So while she's not telling you what she believes on issues, by highlighting certain aspects of her background, she's telling you and signaling to you what her values are. And Michael Burke on the Republican side, he promotes very strongly that he's a former employee of the state's attorney's office, and he promotes the endorsements of other state's attorneys and sheriffs. So you see who is the most important endorser to him, and that's state's attorneys and sheriffs. He talks about being a prosecutor. He talks about public safety. He talks about judicial independence, and that's a little bit of a dog whistle to the conservative side. And so even though they're not telling you what their values are and telling you how they're going to look at cases and view cases, there's a lot that you can glean from what they talk about and how they talk about it in terms of their background and their endorsements and the things that they are allowed to talk about. In the 2nd district, we've got a primary with 3 Democrats, and I will recuse myself here because one of these is my client, and I'll let Julie talk about this.
So there are 2 current judges, Judge Cruz from Aurora, and Judge, I always say her name wrong, Rochford, or is it Rochford, Ed?
I think it's Rockford, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Rochford. And she is a sitting judge in Lake County. And then the final candidate is the current mayor of Highland Park, Nancy Rodering. And I don't know, I mean, we Citizen Action hasn't taken a position on any of these judges. So, but again, Judge Crew, we have 2 sitting judges, and then we have Nancy Rotering, who has argued an important, I know she's argued an important gun case before the US Supreme Court. She's an attorney. She has a strong legal background.
Right. And again, you know, the things that they tell you about their biography on their website, you know, tells you a lot about what their values are. And just one factual thing, she was the client in the case before the Supreme Court.
Oh, right. Sorry. I said that wrong.
I don't want to leave that uncorrect.
Yeah, thank you.
But it was a law that she passed as mayor of Highland Park to a gun control law that was challenged, and she was the plaintiff up to the Supreme Court.
She was the plaintiff. Sorry.
No worries.
This is why we're doing this, by the way, everybody, because you can be steeped in it, and we want everybody on this call to start to get comfortable with all of this.
All right. And then on the Republican side, we have a little bit of an interesting battle. Mark Curran is the former sheriff of Lake County, and I tried to find a website for him and I couldn't. So this website is actually not his website. It's an attack website that someone has set up to attack him, and he doesn't even have his own website up yet. But I thought it was interesting just from the perspective of, you know, we're in January for a June election, and they've got a satire website attacking him up.
Did he run against Durbin? Is that right?
Durbin, yes. Okay. Yes. Then we have John Novorini, who's a sitting judge in Kane County. He was an elected Republican. He resigned his position to run as a Democrat for judge, and now is running as a Republican. He was elected as a Democrat for judge, and now is running as a Republican for that seat for the Supreme Court. And then we have Dan Shanes, who is a sitting judge in Lake County, and he talks about, you know, being a prosecutor and the rule of law and committed to the Constitution. And what I thought was interesting about Shanes, and I don't want to spend much time on this, is that the case we had just talked about with Nancy Rotering going to the Supreme Court, Shanes had his first fundraiser was hosted by the plaintiff who filed the challenge to the gun control law. So again, he's not telling you what he believes about gun rights, but he's having a fundraiser, and his fundraiser is being hosted by someone who was a plaintiff in the lawsuit challenging the gun control law. So even though you can't always get a straight answer from them, if you look closely enough, they're signaling what they're thinking. And then there's an appellate court justice, Susan Hutchinson, who I've heard is considering running, but I haven't been able to find any formal public announcement. So that's what the Republican side looks like. And the reality is it's going to be a very different race in November if you have a Mark Curran who is more affiliated with Trump and the highly conservative part of the Republican Party versus Dan Shanes, who is much more affiliated with the country club Republican types. So that's really the Supreme Court issue, but you know, there were some questions in the chat about subcircuits. There was actually a temporary restraining order issued by the Madison County Circuit Court either yesterday or the day before, challenging what the state court or what the state legislature did with redistricting subcircuits. And so I saw some questions about that in the chat, and I think you know, there are going to be some issues with how the subcircuits are, how they're mapped and how they're populated with judges, because there's some issues about equality of opportunity to vote for judges that are possibly going to come up in the courts and are coming up in Madison County. But we're trending toward more subcircuits, and you know, some people look at that as a pro-democratic thing because you know, you're voting for judges in a smaller geography, and so it's more likely that that minority candidates are going to be elected to the bench, and the Republicans are complaining that we're drawing the sub-circuits in a way that's making it more difficult for Republicans to get on the bench. So that's going to be a bit of a fight over the next couple of years. And then people had asked about endorsements. Judges do fill out endorsement forms, and they answer as many questions as they can, but they rely a lot on bar ratings, which are focused on their experience as a lawyer and as a judge more than they're focused on issues. If you're running for state representative or Congress, it's going to be very focused on, will you support this bill? What do you believe about this issue? Whereas the judicial bar ratings are much more focused on what experience and what skills do you have, and what's your judicial temperament, and things like that. And then the $1 million question, is it preferable to have elected or appointed judges? That's another full 1 hour presentation, but I think we have elected judges. It's in our Illinois Constitution. It's not going to change. So I think we should focus less on whether that's the best way to appoint judge to have judges elected or appointed, and focus more on engaging and educating people and getting them involved, so that we do the best that we can with the process that we have, and make sure that people are going to the ballot educated and doing their best to decide between candidates.
Did you see Linda's question in the chat about how do they fund their campaigns if they can't solicit funds?
Right, they can't personally accept it either. So if I'm a judge and you want to donate to me, you have to donate to my committee. You're not donating to me personally. So you can't hand me a check for $100 and I take it and deposit it into my committee. You've got to donate it directly to the committee.
I was just going to see if there were other questions in the chat. Do bar ratings provide rulings? Where would one go to find rulings? No.
They don't really. I mean, there are two ways that you do that. If you're trying, and it's not easy. The first way is you use some type of online system like Lexis or Westlaw or Case Text or something like that, and you can find out whether the judge's opinions have been overruled or upheld by appellate courts, because most circuit court opinions are not searchable. The other thing that you do is you have to find out what cases the lawyers have been, or the judge have been involved in, and you look those up on each individual circuit website. There's not an easy way to do that. It's a high bar to figure out what opinions a judge has issued at the trial court level. And the bar ratings generally won't include the opinions themselves, but if a judge has had a significant opinion, or has had, if you're a trial court judge and the appellate court has chastised you for a ruling, that'll be in your bar rating review.
I think we're caught up on questions in the chat. So now everybody here on this call has heard our impassioned plea to get involved. We've convinced you that
I think we need to recruit Evelyn to be more impassioned.
I think so. I think we should have scripted Evelyn. And then, but it is true that now you do have on the top, at the front of your mind, several critical legislative initiatives that you've probably been involved in, that you probably care deeply about, and you know that these things are in jeopardy because they're being challenged in other places that have conservative courts. So you're thinking to yourself, how in the world, oh, please put your Twitter handle. Oh yeah, we should have done that. How in the world? So I created like a little Google form about people's interests, and I will share that out through the meeting notes. So when you registered for the meeting, I think Ed talked about, he included in the presentation, he included websites for the various candidates. I mean, monitor the campaigns, find out about them and find out who's donating, kind of read the tea leaves. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, as we start our efforts, Ed and Citizen Action will be posting about it on our social media, various platforms. And the first one, start talking to your friends and family about the importance of these races. It really does start with small groups of people, just talking it up and getting it out there. And we will be, I know that we will be trying to take this presentation and put it in a format that anybody can deliver. I know it seems probably really complicated, but I think we can boil this down to 10 slides that are powerful and persuasive that you can take to your groups and invite us, and we'll come and we'll do a dog and pony show with your groups. But it's really, really important that people begin to talk about this and recognize the urgency and the importance of what's at stake with these vacancies.
Right. And if Julie and I could use you as research tools, if you could put in the chat the one thing that you've heard that is most compelling to you about the Supreme Court race, we'd love to hear that.
Bill Davis asks, how does a judge go from Democrat to Republican back and forth?
So in Illinois, we do not have party registration. And we used to have a law that said you had to wait a certain period of time before switching parties, but that was deemed unconstitutional and a violation of your right to participate in the political process. So we do not have any rules preventing switching party between one election and the next.
And somebody else in the chat said that Darren LaHood is thinking of getting in. Have you heard that?
I have not. That's the first time I've heard that.
That's new to me too. Are there any other questions? If you would put in the chat what you care about, the issues that you care about, the things you hear that are what's compelling to you, we'd sure appreciate it. You can also fill out the Google form and we'll see it there. 10-year terms. The elections have long-term consequences.
There were two questions in the chat that were early on that that you guys got to almost all of them. Rose answered a couple in the chat, but there were two that I didn't hear, and maybe I just didn't hear them. One was Constance Porteous early on said, how does the ordinary voter find out what the judges really stand for?
Right, and I tried to answer that by talking about the reading between the lines in terms of what they put on their website and what they focus on, because judges are often going to tell you, I can't talk about that because of the judicial canons of ethics, but they'll tell you what they did in their background. I mean, if they talk about having been a public defender versus having been a state's attorney, that tells you something. Doesn't tell you everything, but it tells you something. If they talk about having worked in the Children's Defense Fund or having, been on the board of Planned Parenthood or, whatever it is they can tell you about their background that kind of signals to you. And I think whatever they put first on their website is, it's not just a resume, it's what they're trying to tell you about them. And so you've just got to be a little more savvy because they're not going to hit you over the head with it. You've got to read between the lines.
I also think, endorsements will matter if, to the extent that there are endorsements. Somebody asked a question about endorsements. We've rewritten our questionnaire so that it's more like an essay format. I know the AFL-CIO does interviews, so they have like long discussions where the judges can sort of like talk about, or the candidates can talk about their views on on judicial, what do they call judicial theory or whatever. So, you know, where they can kind of go broader instead of like having a questionnaire where you have to check a box. And then there will also be a number of bar associations that will provide, you know, various ratings, LGBT bar, you know, the Chicago bar, there'll be all kinds of those that are out there and to evaluate judges.
There was one other question that it may have been answered also, but I didn't hear it. Earlier on, Noreen Winningham asked, how do judges get the endorsements if they can't talk about these issues? I mean, yes, they do kind of talk about issues.
Yeah, they will communicate about their beliefs in a broader way. Let me just put it that way, from a broader perspective, and that would be. And I gave the example of the AFL because that's
and one of the things, you know, and you know, I represent a lot of judicial clients, and so I look at a lot of these and I say, no, you can't say that. No, you can't say that. And they're like, but I want to say that. And I say, no, you can't say that. Try to come up with a better way to say it, because I don't want them to get an ethical complaint against them. But you know, one of the things that you can say is, you know, I've been a lifetime Democrat and I believe strongly in the values of the Democratic Party. You know, and if someone's willing to say that, that tells you a lot about where they stand.
Oh yeah, and Terry Cosgrove put in the chat that personal PAC endorses. So you'll learn a lot if they get the personal PAC endorsement. Thank you so much to folks for putting the issues you care about, as well as some of the sticky messages that you heard that really helped you feel a sense of urgency about this. Ed and I are both really excited to keep talking to people. So if you want to reach out to us in any way, feel free. Ed, do you want to say anything in closing?
No, thank you. I'm very excited that there are so many people on the call, and I'm very excited that you're enthusiastic, because you know, half of the coin is excitement and half of the coin is nerves, because you know, this is really important. And so thank you for taking your time on a cold Illinois night, and I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate anything that you're willing to do once you've heard this to call to action and make sure that we win these seats in November.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Julie. And I saw what Terry Marr put into the chat also. It's one thing to register people to vote, and it's another thing to actually get them to vote. So we're going to continue talking about how we do that in this group, and we hope that you continue to follow us. This meeting was recorded, and we'll put it up on YouTube. We'll put it also into the email, the follow-up email, including the slides and a link to the recording. This is also live streamed on Facebook, on Indivisible Illinois' Facebook page. And at this time, we're going to pass it to Rose Colacino, who's our Indivisible Illinois State Co-Coordinator, to wrap us up. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, and great presentations. Thank you for being here, Evelyn, Ed, and Julie. I have some additional can't miss events to introduce to you. I will drop the links when I get done talking, so don't leave until you get those, please. Tomorrow night is the Combating School Board Disinformation event at 7 p.m. We are very excited about that. We have 2 events on Saturday. The question that we're all asking me as the voting rights lead is what happens next now that the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, let's just say, is stalled. I'm not going to use the word dead. And we have an answer for you. It's massive voter registration. So we will be talking about that and answering your questions. We're going to be talking about not only Illinois, but also Wisconsin, which was a subject this evening, as well as other swing states. It will be ILVOTE, as well as Field Team 6 and NWSOFA and Indivisible Illinois SJA. Another event will keep you very busy if you allow us to on Saturday at 4 p.m. Wisconsin comes up again. We will tell you how to retire Senator Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. And as I've said many times, that is important to our friends in Wisconsin, but it's also very important to us. It could potentially better balance the Senate, and don't we all want that? The last event I want to tell you about, and then I'm going to pass it to Marci to introduce one more event. We have so many things going on, is the IISJA, the Indivisible Illinois Social Justice Alliance meeting. We are going to be talking about reparations, and I promise you that link will be available shortly. Now over to Marci.
Thank you, Rose. Yeah, there's just one more event. The Indivisible Rural Illinois group is, the subgroup actually, is going to have a meeting next Thursday, February 3rd. It's going to be Richard Martin doing a new perspective on rural Illinois voters. It's a 10-state analysis of Democratic presidential vote declining in working class counties 2012 to 2020. And it's going to be really riveting. So please sign up. Here is the sign up link. And so thank you very much.
And with that, we're going to end this meeting. Thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you next week at the same time for another Indivisible Illinois statewide call. Thanks, everyone.